If you're looking to move to Chicago, and especially if you're planning on living downtown, then there's a good chance that the South Loop neighborhood is on your list. But since neighborhoods in Chicago are so different from one another, you might not be sure if it's the right fit for you or not. So in this video, we're gonna go over the pros and the cons of living in Chicago's South Loop neighborhood. Hi, my name is Peter, and I'm a realtor here in the Chicago metro area. If you're thinking about moving here, or if you want some more information about what it's like to live here, feel free to touch base with me. All my contact info is down below. I'm sure that my team and I can assist you. Well, let's start with the pros, and pro number one has to be South Loop's affordability. Out of all the neighborhoods that comprise of Chicago's downtown, the South Loop is by far the most affordable. Whether you're renting or buying, if you're looking to be as close to the loop as possible and want the most bang for your buck, then South Loop is going to be the right neighborhood for you. The median sales price of a condo in the South Loop is right around $325,000. Compare that to the West Loop, for example, where the exact same condo would be probably worth a little bit closer to $500,000. And of course, the same applies to rentals, where the median rental price in the South Loop is right around $2,000, and the same condo in the West Loop, $2,300. And not only is it a little cheaper to live in the South Loop, but many of the buildings are actually going to be a lot newer here in the South Loop. This neighborhood didn't really begin to expand until the early 2000s, so many of these buildings are anywhere from 15, 10, or even 5 years old, and as a result, they're going to feature a lot more desirable and modern amenities such as open concept living, balconies, gyms, and in-unit laundry. Those same things might be a little bit more difficult to find in neighborhoods like Streeterville and the Gold Coast, but in South Loop, they're very common. So if you're looking to live in an updated building with all the bells and whistles, and you don't want to feel like you're overpaying for it, then the South Loop by far should definitely be on your list. The next pro about living in the South Loop is going to be its centralized location. If you're someone that's going to be working in the central business district, then there's actually a really good chance that if you're living in the South Loop, you'll be able to walk, or at the very least bike, to your workplace, which will make commuting so much easier. And you're also going to be close to the Loop. And I'm not talking about the neighborhood, but the actual CTA Loop, which can easily take you to other parts of the city, such as other neighborhoods, the airports, or sports stadiums. So if you know you're going to be traveling in and around Chicago a lot, the South Loop is going to be a fantastic location to get everywhere easily. The South Loop is also really close to a lot of Chicago's most desirable neighborhoods and all the amenities that those neighborhoods have to offer. This includes things like the restaurant scene in West Loop, the nightlife scene in River North, the theater district in the Loop, and the rich culture of Chinatown. All of these are very unique in their own ways, and the best part is that if you're living in the South Loop, all of them will be very easy to get to depending on your mood and what you want to do. The next pro about living in the South Loop is that this neighborhood also has some of its own amenities for you to take advantage of. For starters, it means that you're going to be close to Grant Park, Soldier Field, the lake, and Museum Campus. Grant Park is one of the city's most celebrated green spaces. It covers nearly 300 acres, and it's frequently referred to as Chicago's front yard. It's great just to stroll through, and you're going to get some fantastic views of the skyline while you're here. Now, Soldier Field is a multi-purpose stadium, and it's also home to the Chicago Bears and Chicago Fire. If you want to join in on the fun of tailgating and the excitement of game day, then you'll be easily able to do so living here. Now, when there is no games going on, Soldier Field is also oftentimes used as a concert venue for some of the biggest stars that come to Chicago. A good friend of mine lives in the South Loop, and whenever there's a concert going on, all he has to do is step out into his balcony and he's able to hear the whole thing live. It's pretty awesome. In general, having Soldier Field so close really brings the neighborhood to life on game and concert nights. On top of that, you'll also have fairly easy access to Lake Michigan. I'm a big advocate of living as close to the lake as possible, and the South Loop puts you right against it, so you can take advantage of the running and walking trails, the great views, and the lakefront breeze. And finally, if you live in the South Loop, you'll also be close to Museum Campus, which consists of the planetarium, the aquarium, and the field museum. These are not only the best museums in the city, but they're also some of the best museums in the entire country, and they're right outside your front door in the South Loop. While you obviously won't be going there all the time, at least probably not, they're great to have nearby when friends and family come to visit. And having all these amenities so close by within walking distance is a massive pro to living in the South Loop. Okay, so we hit on a lot of the pros, but like every neighborhood, there's some cons as well, so let's also talk about those. The first con about living in the South Loop is that it's a much slower neighborhood, and it can sometimes feel like there's not a whole lot of options for things to do in it. This is a neighborhood that definitely sleeps at night, and despite being so close to the center of the city, you won't have many options in terms of nightlife, dining, or entertainment here. And outside of Soldier Field and Museum Campus, there's not a whole lot of destination spots that people from other neighborhoods will want to come visit in the South Loop. Don't get me wrong, there's of course still some options, but relative to other similar neighborhoods, it's actually going to feel a little bit bare. So if you end up living here, don't be surprised if you frequently find yourself traveling to outside neighborhoods to take advantage of other restaurants and nightlife options. But all that being said, because it's a lot more of a peaceful neighborhood, a lot of young families will actually move here to still maintain high density living and a downtown feel without necessarily all the chaos that could come with it. So while I have this listed as a con, for many it could actually end up being a pro. Okay, moving on to the next con of living in the South Loop, it's going to be the parking. Finding parking in the South Loop is already challenging on its own, but when you add in events in Soldier Field, Grant Park, and Museum Campus, you're going to find that a lot of other people from other neighborhoods will come here and take up the parking spots. So if you're a resident, that can get a little frustrating sometimes. The South Loop is also home to the McCormick Center, which is one of the biggest convention centers in this part of the country. So you'll frequently have people coming in from out of town, staying here, and of course, needing somewhere to park. I've been guilty of looking for parking in this neighborhood for up to 25-30 minutes, sometimes just circling around the same couple of blocks. It's not fun, so if you do plan on living here, make sure you either rent or purchase a dedicated parking spot so you don't have any of those issues. It may cost you money, but it'll definitely save you a headache. And the last con about living in the South Loop has to be all of the traffic. Being a part of Chicago's downtown means that naturally, especially during the busy weekdays, you're gonna have a lot of cars coming in and out of the neighborhood. And like with parking, because you have Soldier Field and some other big amenities and attractions here in the South Loop, when events are going on, it pretty much slows things down completely, making it very hard just to go even a couple blocks. The summers are of course notorious for this because all the events are happening, such as the NASCAR race, which was recently brought to Chicago. It's in Grant Park. It's a great event. However, that means that a lot of streets will be closed during various weekends in the summer. So if you must have a car and plan on living in the South Loop, just be mindful of what kind of events are going on in around the neighborhood, because it may end up taking you a whole lot more time just to go a short distance. And there it is. Those are my quick pros and cons about living in the South Loop. It's definitely a fantastic neighborhood, but is it for everybody? Well, hopefully this video helped you make that decision. Thank you so much for watching, and if you're looking to learn a little bit more about what it's like to live in Chicago, feel free to watch any of my other videos where I go a lot more in depth about other neighborhoods and other topics. Thanks again, and catch you on the next video.